right, now over to Lindsey, who will be introducing herself and then starting off with today's session. Thank you.
Oh, hello, everyone. Let me get this screen set up here so I can go ahead and share it. Okay, I'm Lindsey. I am an analyst right now, and not so long ago, I was just like you, starting out and learning these skills that you need for data science and analysis. And I'm so excited that you're here and eager to learn this valuable skill. I have no doubts that after tonight, you'll be more confident in learning SQL. So please remember there's a Q&A box for questions, and all our hosts and leaders will do their best to help you with that as much as they can along the way. And like Sneha mentioned, the slides will be available and the session will be recorded if you need to revisit the concept. So no worries, and let's go ahead and get started. Okay, first we'll do a quick review. So last week, Sneha B did a fantastic job of informing us of all the ways data is stored and used in day-to-day life. So I'm going to try to mirror her enthusiasm for the topic, but she is certainly a great presenter, so no promises. But I think, back to her presentation, you'll remember that we talked about relational databases. So I'm wondering if you all remember what a relational database is. And you can either answer that in your head or type it in the chat, whatever works for you, but just try to think back and remember that important point. So as you're remembering here, I want you to bring you back to this image where basically it's showing us that data is stored in a database, and the DBMS, or the database management system, allows us to perform operations, manipulate and structure data to our needs, and also answer questions about the data. A relational database is more of an advanced version of a DBMS where data is in separate tables and can be connected by relationships. The types of relationships can be one-to-one, so either one customer in a table has only one city it's located in, or one-to-many, one city in a table could have many different customers located in it, or many-to-many, where there would be an order table that has multiple customer orders who are listed in a customer table, and a customer might place more than one order. Hopefully that'll help you kind of get an idea for those relationships. So just to reiterate, the relational database management system structures data into tables and records relationships to each other using keys. So here are the top database management systems out there. Oracle is the most popular according to Google Trends, but if you're interested, go ahead and check out the link when this slides are available. It has more information there about the pros and cons and the popularity of each. And I'm sure we can get in those discussions later on as we move forward. So another thing to keep in mind is that different relational database management systems have slightly different terminology and formats for the same type of data. For example, look at the data type here for each of these systems, and you'll notice how the format is a little bit different. So it's just something good to note when you start to get to the point where you're working with different RDBMSs, and just that there's a little variation there. So now that we're caught up, let's talk operators. There are so many types in SQL, and that allows us to manipulate and display the data the way we want. The term operators and commands can sometimes be used interchangeably, so just FYI there. And tonight we're just mostly going to focus, or today, if it's in your time zone, it's daytime. We'll focus on the comparison and logic. First, let's think about why you would use SQL in a work or personal setting. And essentially it's to ask questions, like I mentioned before, of the data. So this is relevant with business, logistics, customer or patient management, inventory, sales, whatever your discipline may be. So asking good questions is a very important starting point of any query. So what kinds of questions can be answered with SQL query? Well, that depends on the data. Let's take a look at the most common persistent storage operators first. So persistent means whatever manipulation you do with the data and to the data with an operator, it will persist or remain after you log out or power down, and it will persist for all the users. So CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. And here's an example of how the CRUD operations work in everyday life. I'm going to kind of break it down for you here just to give you an example. And this is kind of maybe an automated example. So first, a user could create or insert a client record into a database. That's pretty basic. Next, maybe a client can read or select inventory by browsing through a product catalog. And then select can return all records and some or all fields. When clients place an order, the backend system updates the inventory temporarily to reflect the reduced number of items available. When they purchase the item, the update becomes permanent, and other users reading the number of items available can see the change. Meanwhile, another process creates a record in the shipping company's database, notifying them of the dispatch request. And then if a user removes an item placed in the shopping cart, then the temporary record added to the sales table could be deleted. There's just an example of that. So here are the update and delete operators mentioned. Some notes on the update are if multiple fields are to be updated, the database system ensures they are all updated or not at all. So some big data systems don't implement updates, but allow only timestamp create operation, adding a new version of the row each time. So there's a slight variation there depending on what you're working with. Delete, for example, would be important in something like a payroll environment where an employment record needs to be maintained even after the employee has left the company. There are hard versions of delete, so that's shown here, but there's also a soft delete that flags the record but leaves it in place using the update and set operators. And we'll just focus on the hard deletes for now, but I wanted to introduce you to the concepts of soft and hard delete. So every coding language has syntax, and I think you probably know that, but let's start thinking about some of the SQL syntax here. When asking questions of data, we need conditions and logic. So certain conditions must be met in order for certain actions to be taken. So this is how we control the flow of a query. It allows us to execute different parts of the query depending on whether certain conditions are true or false. So on the left here, we have the conditional operators. And the syntax that kind of goes along with it. I won't go through each of them, but you can kind of take a look. And then on the right here, we have the logical operators and their syntax. So don't worry about memorizing these. We just want you to get familiar with them for now. You'll certainly be exposed to this again. So just kind of take it in, take a look, and we'll move on. But some things I do want to draw your attention to is there's an example of conditions that I'm talking about could be returning records of sales over a certain amount, possibly, or clients with a certain gender, or fields that are missing, anything like that. So one word to remember here that I want to point your attention to is null, and that means unknown, missing, or blank. So also notice the equal sign here means equal to, and also notice the is goes with null. So it's not equal null, it's is null, and similarly not null. And that's kind of how we use it in a query. Another important thing to think about when you're thinking about conditional logic is if then and if else statements, and those are really important. We won't get into too much detail, but I just wanted you to get familiar with the way it's laid out. So basically, an if statement says a condition must be met in order for a certain action to be taken. Then an if else statement would say a condition and two actions are to be taken depending on whether a condition is true or false. There's also, it gets even more complicated with if else statements that say multiple conditions and corresponding actions to be taken depending on which condition is met. So we won't really dive into that in too much detail tonight. It's again, just a primer for these concepts that you might see later on down the road. We'll go easy when we start out. So of the conditional operators, many perform comparisons of data. So you can see that the syntax of those data comparisons are pretty common to what you would see in math if you've used those before. It's very self-explanatory, so nothing to get too worried about here. So here's more logic operators, and take note of the nice tutorial on those slides that'll be available to you with a more of a comprehensive view. Luckily, these are also pretty intuitive words to the action we were trying to take or the results we're trying to view. Some things I will call your attention to are the and or commands. So those are really important ones when starting out. So the and would require satisfying both conditions you're asking about, and the or would require either one or the other. Another thing I wanted to bring your attention to is between. The between command returns true if condition is given, if a condition of a given inclusive range is met. So that'll be important when we start doing our practical in a little bit. Okay, so one fun operator that I wanted to bring your attention to now is distinct, and it allows us to see only unique values. Sometimes certain columns in a table will have duplicate values due to each record sharing a similar attribute. This would allow you to only see the ones that are different. So here's an example of what that syntax would look like. And then another FYI, the term fields and columns and attributes are often used interchangeably in the data science world. So sometimes you'll hear people use different ones. Use what's comfortable to you. If you're in this type of community, typically people will understand what you're talking about. So we have discussed the CRUD operators. So here are more commands that allow us to perform and control results of the query. Lots more commands, but don't get worried. I'll tell you which ones to pay attention to. This is not a comprehensive list, so just get familiar. What we want to look at is the select and where. For now, you already know that select, but where is how we apply those conditions we were just talking about with comparison or logic. So that'll be very important. There are even more, and the list goes on and on. Again, it's not comprehensive, but just a good solid starting point. On this list, pay close attention to distinct again, and then also draw your attention over to set. That'll be important later on as well. Set states which column to change to what value when using the update command. Okay, so all coding languages have syntax. We kind of reviewed some commands. Let's talk about how to structure the query correctly so the results are accurate, which is very important. This is a great example of how to start. So this image kind of reminds us the order of which this, we need to structure the query. Select something or a column from a table where some conditions are satisfied or required. Notice it is a common practice to signify the end of a query with a semicolon. Don't forget that. And then also each new condition should typically be on a separate line just for ease of reading and reviewing. It's a best practice as well. Here's a slightly more advanced example of controlling query flow. Basically what this is telling us, and we won't go into too much detail, but I just wanted you to notice that once again, we're saying basically select something or a column from a table where there is a comparison of a mix of conditions, whoops, sorry about that, that need to be met for the desired outcome to execute correctly. And don't memorize this right now. It'll start making a lot more sense as we work through these exercises. So before we get started with our live coding, I just want to remind you the Slack channel that Sneha mentioned. There is, if you can get into Slack, this is how you find our channel. But once again, you've already been provided those links. All right. So let's yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there is a question in the chat. Could you repeat the set command quickly?
Yes. Okay. So when we talked about update, we talked about update in somewhat more of detail, but set is actually what you would use if you were going to be updating a field or a column. Set is what you would actually use to update that with and specify what the value should be updated to. So it's like two commands that work together to do that job. I hope that clarifies things. If not, we can go into it in more detail. But you'll see this again. So don't really worry about that. So in the chat, we're going to have a link to this practical website that we're using to give all of this a try. There's basically this platform is going to act as our relational database management system. So go ahead and follow the link and kind of get set up. And I'm going to switch over to that as well. And basically, while we're doing that, I want you to pretend that you are a new analyst for a hospital chain. So basically, our administrators and executives of this hospital chain have some decisions to make, and they need a few questions answered, and you can help with that. Okay, let me...
The link to the SQL practice is in the chat also, everyone.
Thank you.
Just in case, yeah.
Okay, so... as I'm switching over, I hope everyone is getting situated. Please let us know if you're having any issues with this. Let's see. Thank you for your patience. Okay. Everyone's seeing my screen okay? I believe.
Yeah,
perfect. Okay, so welcome new analysts. You'll probably see some distracting ads on the left-hand side. You can click those if they're distracting for you. We chose this platform for ease of use. So, you know, I apologize for that, but you'll find it very simple to use. And then you'll also notice this big center box. This is your interface for your relational database management system. On the left, you'll notice a simple SQL database. This is your database here, and you go ahead and click on it. I'm hoping everyone, I'm not moving too fast. Is everyone with me here? Give a thumbs up or a reaction. And we have some more lovely ads over here. Okay, so I'll talk about this as everyone's getting caught up. This is our database. And of course, we have 4 tables since it's a relational database. And if you click on them, you can kind of see the contents, so the column names here and the data types here of each table we're looking at. Okay, and you'll notice there's a key symbol here. That simply means that this is a primary key. And that means that it's a unique identifier for each role in the or each row in the table. This way we avoid having duplicate entries. So basically, you know, each entry has a might have some similar columns or attributes, but if there's a unique identifier, then we know it's not a duplicated field, or I mean, a duplicated row. Okay, so notice the green button at the top left. This is how we're going to execute or run our queries once we've developed them. So you'll be pushing that, but not yet. One thing I did not mention that's important is how to make a comment near your query. So there's an example of a query up here. And if you wanted to make a comment, you would just do 2 hyphens, a double hyphen there. Or you could also use the syntax here as well with the star and the slash, but this is common practice. And the reason you would want to do this is if you were trying to document your thought process, you're trying to explain the work you're doing, your workflow, or you wanted to make it very clear for someone else who would be reading your queries, what it was you were trying to accomplish. And we'll be using it here as well for highlighting which questions we're going to attack. So in the chat, you'll also be getting a list of our questions. So we don't need to worry about too much else. You can go ahead and clear your box there because we're going to have the questions prepared for you. And I think those have been sent to you. Correct me if I'm wrong. But we'll go ahead and start with this query that we see here. So I didn't mention this little asterisk. When you say select star or asterisk from a table, what this will do is it'll show you all the contents of a table. So go ahead and try that out because we want to view what that looks like. And you can do this for all tables. We won't do that now, but you can essentially play with that if you'd like to see what it looks like. And you notice I just click run. One thing that's going to be important is as we're building this out and we're putting new queries down here, you're going to want to just highlight the query that we want to run when there's multiples on here. And I'll repeat that for you, but you're going to need to highlight the query you want to run. Okay, I think that's about all the housekeeping from that. Let's take a look at our first question. Am I going at a good pace? Just want to make sure I'm not moving too fast, but I do want to be able to get through a lot of these questions because I feel like you'll start feeling more confident. What I'd like you to do now is another best practice to ensure that we are meeting all the demands of the questions that's being asked of us, right? There's all the conditions our seniors are trying to get met. We don't want to miss any of the conditions. So what I recommend doing is copying that first question from your sheet and pasting it into a comment. So that won't run with our query. It'll just be there for our information. And it's just a good best practice to have it directly in front of you. So what another best practice to do in order to make sure you can display that you have a good attention to detail and that you don't miss any parameters is to break the query down into its parts. And we won't exactly do that for every question, but for right now, I want to try to work, let me get this out of the way. Try to work with what we have here and do at least our first query with that. So show first name, last name, and gender of patients who is M. And I think everyone can say that that's male. So, and then all it'll have is M in the field. And these little hyphen, I forget what they'd be like apostrophes or colons. These will be signifying it's a text. So the M would be the input in a text box or a character box. And if we want to make sure our query includes those so that we get the correct response. If we just put simply an M in there, it won't show anything. Okay, so breaking it down.
Sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Lindsey.
Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah, so sorry. So there are a lot of people in the chat who are asking for the questions again. Just to everyone, I have put the question link again, the Google Docs link. So please do click on that. And there are some people who are asking, where did that show first name, etc. come from? So Lindsey, I
Yes.
think that's the first question.
It is. So when you finally get to that document, maybe I'll give some more people some time to catch up. You'll see a list of questions, and this is the first question on that list. All I did was copied it from the list and paste it right into my box with a comment. Don't forget that, because it's not part of our query. It's just part of information for us. So I will give it a minute here for people to catch up with the questions. I don't want anyone to miss out what's going on, especially with this first one, because we're going to kind of break it down into its parts. Let me see how we're doing on time here. Okay, I think we're moving along pretty well. If someone wants to give me kind of a thumbs up or let me know if we think we should move forward. I just want to make sure we're not leaving anyone behind.
Hi, so could you just like, so I think someone, there are a couple of people are saying it could be better if you could slow down just a bit.
Sure.
And I think someone on the Q&A box asking if the hyphen is a comment for SQLpractice.com or for all IDs.
I would believe it was for all, but it probably
All
depends.
IDs.
Yes, yeah, and it depends on kind of what the common practice is with who you're working with, because I have used a star asterisk before, but I think this is more common.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I
So
think we're good.
Yeah, and I don't know if anyone here has used Python before, but it's similar to, you know, the hashtag sign that you would use to comment out in Python. Okay. I'm going to go really slow through this. So if you're still pulling up your questions, it's quite all right. So I just want to break this down. It says show first name. So if we can remember from the slides, how do we show something, or how do we read rather the data that we are looking for? There was a specific command that went with read, and I don't know if we want to put the answers in chat, or I could probably just go really slow. But if
Yes, we have the correct answers in chat.
Perfect. I love to hear that. So select is kind of our starting point here. So we want to select the first name, but we can't simply just type in first name. We need to know how the title of the column looks, and it's first underscore name. So you'll love the fact that when you start typing, whoops, let me space it. There is a nice predictive text that will find it for you. It makes things easy. So we have found the first parameter of the question we're trying to ask. We're trying to show the first name, last name, and gender. So those are the records. That's what we want printed up as a result of our query. First name, last name, and gender. So first of all, we'll just focus on first name, and then we can add the other parameters later. So of patients, so we're looking for first name, last name, and gender of patients. So where do we need to find this information from? What table would we want to use to query? And you can kind of ponder that for a minute, and then also ponder what command we use to signify which table we're going to query from.
I think once again, we have the right answers in the chat. People
That's
are saying
so great. Awesome. I think we're keeping up here. That's great. So when we want to say which table we're querying, we say from. So we're also going to use the patients, because it's pretty well noted there that that's what we're looking for. So we're going to select first name from patients. We're not done with our query yet. And then there is a condition here. So before I get that far, we can go ahead and add what are the other fields and other columns we need to type up there in the select row. We're missing some things. We're missing last name. And you can add that there with a comma. And we have one more to add. You would just put a comma here, and you would add it right onto the end. Okay. So now in our query, we're selecting first name, last name, and gender. It's going to show the genders as well from the patients table, and that's what we would be displaying. But there is a condition to meet here, right? We need all of the fields that we're going to show to for gender to say M. So what what command do we use to specify a condition? Very basically. Does everyone remember that?
Yes, we have answers that say where.
Yay. Okay, very good. Where? So, and then we remember those operators, those comparison operators. So when we say when it is something, it'd be the same as saying equal to. So what we want to tell it is which column, so where gender is equal to, and then what would go here? We would probably want to give it the gender, and don't forget signifying that it is a text. What is missing from our query? There's one last thing. I think we've got all the parameters: first name, last name, gender, from patients.
People say it's the semicolon.
Very good. Excellent. So now we can go ahead and highlight this. We don't really need to because there's only one query here, but we will later on. And we can run our selection. And then you can take a look at your results here. And you've created an output with exactly what they were looking for. Those higher ups at the hospital. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and move on now.
We have a question in the chat. Instead of the equal to operator, can we use the keyword is?
As far as my knowledge goes, that is reserved for only the null command, the null parameter or operator. So I don't typically use is unless I'm working with null. And please hop in and correct me if I'm wrong, but it wouldn't work the same in this particular situation. It wouldn't work. We want it to be equal to, and that if someone wants to elaborate, I don't know the exact reasoning behind why that's the syntax. It just kind of is, and that's with all programming languages. Okay, now I'm going to, while you're all kind of catching up as well, I'm going to copy and paste the second question into the comment field here. And I did want to mention too, if you're working at your own pace and you want to go ahead, or if you were a little behind as well, it's totally okay. This is all at your own pace. We are going to provide the list of answers at the end, so you can keep working on your own time if you like. So next, we're going to show first name and last name of patients who do not have allergies. Do not. So that tells me something key we were just talking about. If they don't have allergies, then that field over here for allergies would probably be blank, or would probably say null or some other term that they were, signifying that there was no allergies. So in this case, we're gonna say null because that's what we've been working with. But how do we structure this query? So once again, we want to show something. So we're going to select something, select a column. And once again, we need the first name and the last name. Okay, and then once again, we are looking into the patient's table. So we're going to tell it what table to view from patients who do not have allergies. So once again, what command do we use to signify the condition? Where? This is where it gets tricky though. So we need to tell it which column, we're doing the condition for, and then it would be allergies right here. Where allergies, and then I would say is, and that keyword null. Sorry, whoops. And we're going to finish it off with a semicolon. Okay, now we're going to need to highlight this before we run it so it gives us the correct output. And we can see it here, but how do we know we did this correctly? I mean, this is great. We have our list here. The hospital heads will be happy, but we want to double check our work. So one thing we could do is we could add another column to the side to double check that all of those records came up as indeed null. And what we can do is we can add, what column do you think we could add to do that? Does anyone know? If you said allergies, you would be correct. And now we can run this again and we can check our work. They should all say no. And they do. well, I didn't review all 2000 records, but you know, I'm putting a lot of faith that we did our query correctly, because I'm pretty sure it's right. Here's one thing to keep in mind though. So if you submitted it like this during either, you know, an interview or, you know, an academic setting, or even to your bosses, they might not like the fact that you were not paying attention to the exact instructions of the query, and they did not want to see allergies. This is not something they wanted to show. So you can check your work here, but before you submit it, make sure to only have those two columns they wanted to see in your output. Something to think of. Excellent. I hope you're feeling all a little more confident now. We're getting the structure down. We're gonna start getting a little harder, but nothing that you can't handle. So on the third question, we are going to copy and paste it in here. Okay, and now we're working with show first name and last name of patients that weight is within the range of 100 to 120. And I'm going to say that is inclusive. So we want to include the 100 and the 120. And I think you've probably guessed how we start this off. We want to select something. What we need to select is the column first name and the column last name. And it doesn't say we need to select anything else of patients. So this is getting a little easier for us now, because we know that this information is in the patients table. And we want to see their weight. We don't want to see it on the output, but we want to make a condition based on their weight. So as in all conditions, or most at the level we are at, we're going to say where. And I'm sure you all can figure out which column that we are looking at with this condition. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's right over here, and we'll type in weight. And now I brought your attention to a command that would be an inclusive range of values. And if you can remember that, kudos to you and bonus points. Does anyone remember what that command would be? Do we have any answers?
Between.
All right. Some very astute people paying attention. Thank you so much. So yes, we'd want to say between. And what numbers are we looking between? We're looking 100. And because it's a second condition, 120. And then we finish it off with our semicolon. Go ahead and give that a run. And we can see that here. And once again, if you wanted to double check that our work is correct, you could just add on the column weight. Whoops. Whoops, I didn't highlight. I did what I told you not to do. And we can check our work here as well. And it looks like we did a decent job, at least with this list. And what I'll do is get rid of that so that our output shows exactly what we meant to show. And that'll be so helpful if you ever find yourself in interviews. Okay, moving on to the next one. We're still kind of doing easy questions. Go ahead.
We'll just wait for 10 seconds. Quick, we were having people asking us to go slow. So we'll wait for like 10 seconds. If you have any question, you can let us know in the Q&A box. Otherwise, she'll go ahead to the next question.
Sure. We have 8 total of these questions, and I don't want to rush through them at all. You can definitely try to attack them on your own, but I did want to try to cover at least as much as we can. So we'll try to wait just a moment here, let everyone catch up. And this is probably the first time you've built a query structure, so it's totally normal. Go slow, that's really good. Take it all in. While you're doing that, I'm going to copy and paste the 4th question into the compiler here. And this is where things are going to get a little more tricky. And you're going to have to remember that update command that we talked about before, and the corresponding command that goes with it to set the new value. So I was going to ask if anyone can kind of start this query off for us, but I think that you know pretty well by now that when we want to select something, we want to show something, we use select, but this is a little different. So it says update. It doesn't say to display or show anything. It's telling us that we need to update some records with some new values here. So update the patient's table for the allergies column. If the patient allergy is null, then replace it with NKA in those, once again, those little apostrophes, or yeah. So to set this one up, it's going to be slightly different. Instead of select for our first command, what do you think we need to use? Does anyone have any guesses? I'll go ahead and give you a hint. It's right there in the first word of the
We have the correct answer.
question. Yay! I'm so proud. Awesome. So what we want to do is we want to update the patients table. It's telling us exactly what to update. So we're going to tell it update patients. So we're working with that table. But in order to actually update it, what's the other command we need to use in order to change the value of null to NKA? Does anyone remember this one?
People are saying set.
Congrats. That's the right answer. So you're doing very well. So, but then we need to tell it what column we're setting. And it tells us right here, allergies column. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Thankfully, it's very straightforward. So we need to set allergies equal to. So we want that column to equal a certain response or a certain text field. So just like we did up here, we're going to use the equal to, and we're going to tell it exactly what it says we need to change those values to. But if we leave it here, what's going to happen? Any guesses? Are we going to maybe update the whole column of allergies to everyone having the NKA signification? That's probably not what we wanted here, right? We had this last part of our question. This condition needs to say that allergies is null. So we need to find all those ones that are null. So how do we do that? How do we set the condition again?
People are saying where.
Yay. Yes, that's correct. So once again, where, what column are we looking at this condition for? Allergies is, and remember, we're using is instead of that equal sign, is null. Oops, I don't know why. I don't know if it matters. There we go. Okay, let's see how we did. This is going to give us a little bit different of an output. Notice how I'm not displaying anything, but it does say rows modified, and that does look like the correct amount of rows based on what we saw before with this query. So we kind of know that our job is what it was supposed to be. We could check our work kind of similar to how we did before, but since this is not an actual relational database, I've tried that before our session and it actually doesn't update anything. It just gives us this output. So you would still say null, but in a real life setting, if it gives you this output, we've definitely updated it to where it needs to be. Fantastic. Yeah, we're plowing right through these easy level questions, which is fantastic. And we'll start with the next one. We're going to try to add a few more elements to our search now. I might have to delete some of those questions up top. Okay, so now we need to show first name, last name, and weight of patients that's weight is within range, like we did before, and gender is F for female. So this is going to be a little bit more tricky, but the first line should be pretty self-explanatory. Once again, we're showing records, so we're going to select records. And it says we need to do the first name. It says we need to do the last name. And it says we also need to show the weight. So what am I going here? Okay, and that's all that we need to show. Show first name, last name, and weight of patients. So that tells me what? We need to select this from the patient's table. Okay, next we need to set a condition. And we all know, you've been answering this one right every time. Where? What's our condition? Weight. So we need to look at the weight column. Weight. And then here's where it gets a little tricky. Before up here, we did weight between 100 and 120. We can do that again, but it's not all of our condition. And 120. Does anyone remember the command you use when you need both conditions to be met in order for the query results to be accurate? We just used it.
So people on the chat are saying and.
Correct. Yeah, and it is. And then we need to tell it what that gender column is equal to. So we use the operator equal, and we tell it what the text should say in order for it to be accurate. So now we're selecting the first name, last name, and weight of patients that's weight is within the range of 100 to 120 inclusive, and the gender is female. We'll go ahead and do that and see how we did. Oops, I have an error here. Let me figure out where I put it.
I think you forgot to write
Yes.
gender. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, it's saying I have a syntax error.
Like after 100 and 120 and you did
Gender equals F.
gender equals to, right? Like,
Oh,
yeah, the last
yes,
one.
thank you. I think keeping me on my toes, I skipped a very important piece. What are we saying equals F? The gender. I forgot the column.
And I think a lot of our audience pointed out, so like a huge shout out to them as well.
Yes. Yeah. And I'd like to play that off like I was trying to keep you on your toes, but these things do happen. And so I would have to go back and say, oh, yes, I forgot the column here, gender. And that does happen.
So I think we have a very nice question since it's pertaining to this, what you're doing currently, I thought I'd ask.
Sure.
So we have Chiranjeev who asks, which and will work first?
So when it's reading the query, I just need a little clarification. So are
Yeah,
you
since
talking
I
about
think
which
there are
of these?
two and yeah.
So the query kind of goes in the order that things are structured. That's why it's very important that we structure it correctly. So it would first check the range of the weight, and then it would check the gender. I hope that answers your question.
Yep, I think that was a really good answer. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. I'm glad I can help. I love that you guys are just keeping me on my toes, and you're just plowing through these easy level questions so well. You're going to do fantastic as we get a little bit more advanced in the next session.
Sorry, just one last question. Because I mean, again, it's because of this, so we don't forget it later on. Do we need to add a comma before and, but do we need to add a comma after and, but before gender?
No, you do not. If you just have your space there and your and is, uppercase and it looks as you do there, you do not need to comma. The commas are basically used just when you want to add extra columns to your output, which you're going to view, because they don't have operators. We're just telling it to show specific things. These operators are acting as our comma, so to speak. It's already breaking that up for us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm really sorry, this is the last thing,
Okay,
because I
yeah,
feel
no.
like we've been asking this a lot today. What is the difference between equal to and is? Like we've seen a lot of this in the Q&A box as well.
Yeah, I would love to dig in and find you a better answer than what I offered. What I mentioned before is that I've only seen is used when you're using the operator null, not null or null. When you're looking for those fields that are either blank, missing, or labeled as null, that's when you use is. When you're looking for an exact value of a column or field, that's when you would use equal. I know that I really wish I could find a better explanation. Maybe Sneha can help me out with that, because I'd love to know. It's one of those things I've always been like, and then I just decided, okay, I guess I got to remember that. But I never looked into the why. And there's a lot of that in coding, depending on what language you're using. And that's maybe just the preference of the person who developed the language, but I'm sure there's a better answer, and I'd love to hear it if there is. So please keep me updated if you find something. Okay, so while we're doing that, these are excellent questions, like great discussion. I'm loving this so much. Okay, I think I need to get rid of some of the stuff up here. I'm hoping that we at least all know what's going on with that. I just want to make sure we have enough room. So I just deleted the first question. So hopefully we're all moved past that and we're ready for the next. Okay, this is going to get fun now. So based on the cities that our patients live in, so we're going to want to find out what cities they're living in, right? And there's another column there for that. So that's good. Show unique cities that are in Providence ID in S. So very specific Providence. Unique, that reminds me of something that we learned earlier. Because can anyone remind me of the command that we use when we want to find the unique values of a column? Anyone remember that, the name of that?
People are saying distinct.
Yay, distinct it is. So that's important because we're going to start off this query a little bit different than the others. So whereas before we wanted to select and place in the column names that we wanted to show in our output, now we're going to say that we need, because we only want to show unique, right? So you're going to put these commands right next to each other because we only want to show the unique ones. So select distinct. And what are we selecting distinct of? The cities. So we need to put in that column as well. So we've selected our distinct city. From what table are we doing this in? Well, you can all remember we've been working on patients for a while, so that's pretty self-explanatory. And this isn't too hard. Think about what our condition is again. So what command are we using for conditions tonight or today, depending on where you're coming or calling in from? We're using where. So there's a specific column that we're looking the condition for. And it's called Providence ID or Province ID. We are in Canada, I believe, as far as our hypothetical situation is here. So here is that nice little signifier again between equals and or equal and is. So right now we need to say a Providence ID that's a very specific value. So which operator are we going to use in this situation? I hope you're all saying. Yes, we're going to use equal. And then we're going to need to tell it what it's equal to. So don't forget, we need to have these around the NS to produce the correct results. Okay. Let's go ahead and run it and see what we get. Okay. So all the cities that are located, all the unique cities located in this province ID are listed here. Did anyone have any troubles with this one? It's pretty similar to what we're doing.
We have a question.
Yeah.
If it was to be typed as select patient from distinct city, would that work?
Select patient from distinct city. No,
Yes.
because yeah, and the reason why that wouldn't work is because you would be telling it select a column patient from, and you'd have to tell it from what table. So there is no column patient. There's a patient ID, and perhaps if you put select patient ID in there, it would work, but that would not be the correct answer to our query here, because as you can see, we need to say from table patients. If you say select patient, it's going to be looking for a column in whatever table we told it. So that would be saying I'd be looking for a column here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that really makes sense. So just to sum up your thoughts, basically, if you say select patient, that would imply that patient here is basically a column, but we're using patient as a table. So it's better to say select distinct city from patient. So I hope
Correct.
that.
And because we are only looking at cities, correct? That's what we want to output is the city. That's the only thing it asks to see is the distinct, the unique cities. So that's what we have here. And if we didn't put distinct in here, it would bring up all the cities in this province. But this is the exact command we need for the unique output of those cities. Very good. Okay. Moving right along. We have two more. You guys are doing great. I don't know if we're going to go over on time,
Lindsey?
if that's okay. Yeah.
Can people do the next question and post the answer in the chat? Let's see. Like if, and then you can
Yeah.
like give them 5 minutes and then
I would
they
love
try
that.
this question. Yeah.
Okay. It's a little bit of more of a challenge now, but it's similar level to what we just did right here. So don't get too worried. And this is fun, right? No pressure. Okay. So we're going to paste the next question in here. Write a query to find list of patients. So we're going to find a list of patients, first name, last name, and allergies. So it's telling us what it wants to see from the output. From Hamilton. And Hamilton, if I'm not mistaken, would be a city name, I believe. I just want to kind of help you set up here. And once again, allergies not null. I apologize for giving this one to you as your challenge question, but it's okay. There's no, pressure to get this correct. This is just a little bit of a exercise on how you're going to think through this process, because not always are you going to be given the questions for the queries very laid out nicely in the order of which you need to structure your query. So this is good practice.
So I think we have
so many answers.
Yeah, I think Lindsey, it's better if you
What would you like me to do? Show the answer or walk them through it?
I think maybe you can take a look at the answers there, because I think you'll be the
Oh,
judge.
yeah. Let me do that. Pull the chat up. I'm so sorry. I've been kind of trying to not get distracted with that because you guys have been doing so excellent and helping me out. Okay.
Yeah,
So
I don't want to read it out because it's like a command and everything. So I think it's better you check through that, see if people are making an error, and you can sum it
sure.
up.
Yeah, I'm seeing some great stuff here. So select first name, last name, allergies. So that's what we want to view. Correct. That's what it's asking for. From patients. That's the table we need to query. That's correct. Where city is equal to Hamilton. Making sure that we have put those apostrophes around the word Hamilton. And there's a second parameter that must be met, right? And is what we use to make sure that that second parameter is met as well. Allergies would be the next column of the condition we need to meet. Not null. I see lots of correct answers here. I'm very excited about that. So I think I think everyone is getting this splendidly. And I'll go ahead now, since everyone's done such a good job and just been proactive in typing this, I'll just put it up here so we can all see it together. And we need to say from patients, where the column city is equal to Hamilton. Make sure I spell that right. And the column allergies, not null. I know it's confusing that we don't say is not null, but this language isn't supposed to be read like, a spoken language. It's just meant for logic purposes. So that's why they do that. And this is how our query should look. And we'll go ahead and run it and show our output. And we can see which allergies each of these individuals has, but this is only for the city of Hamilton. We have one more challenge. This is a stretch challenge question. The next one is meant to kind of introduce you to new topics that we will be looking at in the next series. I think it might be best to either walk through it together, or what do you think, crowd? Do you think we should go ahead and walk through it together, or do you want to give everyone a chance to try it? I'll go ahead and put it up here now in case we have any brave souls that want to give it a stab. Why not?
So we have people who are saying, like, can we walk through it together?
Okay. Thank you for that feedback. I'm going to get rid of this up here, just wait, not all the way below. A little easier to see. Okay, so now we're going to show unique birth years from patients.
Before you continue with the next question, someone's asked, in the previous question you've written where city equal to Hamilton and allergies not null, right? So we have Shannon who's asked, is it is not or just not null?
Yes, and I knew that would throw people for a loop. Once again, you don't say is not, it's either is null or not null. And the reason is, I think I mentioned, it's not because it's not supposed to make sense as far as a spoken language, it's just a logic language. So that's how it was written. And we just say is null or not null. And that's how you signify the difference.
Got it. So, I mean, when you're saying it out loud, you're trying to say is not null, but when you're trying to write it down in SQL, it's either is null, and when you want to say is not null, you'd simply say not null.
Correct. I know it's a hard urge to avoid, but you just have to start thinking in terms of logic.
So some people are saying that is not null runs too. Like apparently, I think a few of our audience have tried that out and it runs for them as well.
That's great. So, you know, I've never done that before, but fantastic. And that must be because this is a common thing. Most people just assume it would be is not null. Fantastic. Okay. So we have our last challenge, stretch challenge query here to do. We need to show unique birth years from patients and order them ascending. So I don't expect you to know this. We're introducing 2 new topics here that you didn't get previously. And it is a command called order by. You might have seen it in the list that we went over earlier. There's also a command in here, or not really command, but also, you know, it's called alias, where we rename a certain column based on the output. And we'll get into that further, but I just want to kind of show you how this works. So, of course, we need to show the unique birth years. And we don't really have a column called birth years. What we have here is a birth date. So we need to kind of adjust that so we can show the output that they're asking for. First of all, we know how to select a unique value of a column. So we're going to say select distinct. And then we need to find year from the column birth date. And this is all new. So if you're going, whoa, 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 where did this come from? It's not trickery. I'm just exposing you to new concepts. This is all new. So we're going to select the year from birth date, and then we're going to name that something different with the as command. And it's a way of giving an alias to a specific column or a restructured value of a column to name it what we want to name it. Hopefully that makes sense. I hope I didn't confuse anyone with that. So now we have, oh, whoops, I messed up. We don't want to call it birth date. We want to call it birth year. Show unique birth years from patients. So the next part should be pretty easy for you because we know we're working with the table patients. Next, we need to order them in ascending order. I think you can probably guess the last part of this out. There is a command I mentioned earlier that does this, and it's called order by. Order by. And what are we ordering? We're ordering the birth years. So we're going to tell it birth year because now we've, whoops, if I could spell correctly. Birth year, because we renamed it over here. And then ascending. So the way we would say that is we would give it an ASC. We don't need to spell out the whole word ascending. And then descending, I believe, is just DSC. And it sounded intimidating, but really once you look at it, when it's done, it makes a lot of sense. I really do feel like anyone can learn SQL. And we'll give it a run. And they are indeed in ascending order. And if you, go ahead.
So someone's asking, is year a keyword, and what does year do basically?
That's a good question. So we are basically pulling a component. I didn't touch on this earlier, and I should have. There's a large rabbit hole of concepts that we can get into, but birthday is a date column. So you can notice here that the data type is date. So typically those would be like either a date stamp or a time stamp. And it's structured in a specific way where it would be formatted by, you know, they would have the day, the month, the year in some way, however that's ordered depending on which relational database management system you're working with. And so if you're able to have those parts of that date stamp, you can pull out components of it. So that's what this year is doing here. It's acting as a command, I guess, in a way. And if you guys have a better, if the helpers and the leaders who are on the call here have a better explanation, feel free to jump in. I do not, I love the input, but it is acting somewhat as a command to pull out the exact piece of that date stamp that we need.
Got
It's
it.
basically getting rid of everything else, right? And just pulling out what we want to see out of that date. Hopefully that
Okay.
helps.
All right. I think that if that doesn't help, please do ask a follow-up question. But I think that would have probably cleared up a few things. So there's just a feedback on the chat where people are asking if you can increase the font size of what you're sharing on screen.
I'm not sure that I can, quite frankly. I can just zoom in. That's all I
Yeah,
can do.
yeah.
Whoops, I
Yeah,
don't
I
like
think
that.
that's much better. Yeah.
Oh, I should have done that so much earlier. I'm so sorry. Thank you for mentioning that. It's a good feedback.
All right.
And that was the stretch question. So you should feel very accomplished this evening or this morning. And you've had some good time spent with your weekend ahead of you. You can feel very productive. And we're definitely open for questions now. I know it's a little over time, but we certainly enjoyed our time with you. And we're very excited for you to get into this. It's a really valuable tool that you'll find is in a lot of job descriptions.
So first of all, Lindsey, I'd like to say thank you so much for that wonderful session. I was also trying to follow along because I'm a beginner and I really enjoyed it and I totally understood everything. And because I was like kind of answering questions and everything, maybe I was not able to try out everything on my own, but I did try the initial few commands on my own as well. So it was really good. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad.
I think we can take a few questions if that's okay. I mean, I know we're a bit over time, but maybe just a few because there are so many in the chat.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right. Okay. So someone's asked, since ASC is the default value, is it a good practice to use it before? Oh, so is it a good practice to use it or is it better to leave it out? Like since ASC is the default value, by default, you'll have ascending sorting.
I would say it's best practice. Oh, go ahead. Sneha B is going to answer the. Oh, she's okay. You're actually.
No.
I see now. Yeah. Actually, it's best practice to go ahead and type everything out. I would say that's just a good practice to get into, because if you get in the habit of just relying on default, sometimes you can run into problems with making sure that your query is thorough. Also, it just shows good attention to detail. And I hope that the others will back me up on that answer, but I would say just put it in there as best practice.
So I think I'm also still learning, so I would totally agree with you. But I think if anyone else in our current panel has anything to add on to that, please do go ahead. Okay, so the next question is, how does it know the first 4 digits are the year?
Oh, I don't know if I can answer that question explicitly, because I think it's more of a logic question within the language. It is related to the data type. So it is structured in a way, this data type tells the language that it is a specific date. So now it knows how to pull out components of that date, depending on how it's formatted. If you go back, when you get the slides, you can go back to that one slide in particular where it shows you how different relational database systems have different formats for different data types and kind of called different things. You can see that the data type date, in no matter what relational database management system you're in, that data type signifies that it is a date. So it does indeed know the components of the date. And depending on how it's formatted for the relational database, it's going to know which year, which number is the year.
Okay, I think this was also a question that was there previously. I think someone's answered it. And I also had this question. Is there something called month or a day or date or something like that? Like, how there's year, is there another keyword called month or date?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I need to look this up. So I'm double check, but I believe it's year, month, day.
Yes, that's correct.
SQL is very intuitive. So a lot of times I think I know, because it just, once you start learning it, it's just very straightforward, but it's always good to double check.
All right, so I think that's all the questions we have. And yep, I think if anyone has any other questions, you can ask, or maybe I think we can end it for today.
I really enjoyed my time with everyone, and I'm super excited that you're interested in learning how to query data. It's good for any job you're in.